The dust from the approaching rider clouded the evening horizon as Josephine Halloway peered through the dirt-streaked window of Santa Fe's general store, knowing the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down her faded calico dress, the weight of the last 3 days pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. The scandal that had erupted after the bank robbery had painted her as an accomplice, and though she was innocent, the whispers followed her everywhere in this unforgiving town. New Mexico Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman with a tarnished reputation. Josephine had arrived in Santa Fe just 6 months prior, hoping to escape the confines of Boston society after her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. At 22, she had expected to build a quiet, respectable life as the town's new schoolteacher. Instead, she found herself entangled in a web of suspicion and scorn. "Miss Halloway," Mrs. Peterson called from behind the counter, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. "Will you be paying for those supplies today, or should I add them to your account?" Josephine felt the familiar heat of shame creep up her neck. "Cash, Mrs. Peterson. I have the money right here." She placed the coins on the counter, careful not to meet the older woman's judgmental gaze. The bell above the door jingled, and several heads turned. Owen Xander, the ranch foreman from the Double Creek Ranch outside of town, ducked his tall frame through the doorway, removing his hat as he entered. At 28, Owen had earned a reputation as a fair but formidable presence in the territory. His sun-bronzed face was partially obscured by a neatly trimmed beard, and his eyes keen as a hawk's surveyed the store before landing on Josephine. She immediately lowered her gaze, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The last person she wanted to see her in this state was Owen Xander. They had shared only a handful of conversations since her arrival in Santa Fe, but each one had left her feeling oddly breathless. "Afternoon, Mrs. Peterson," Owen greeted, his deep voice carrying through the store. "I'll need some coffee, flour, and a couple pounds of sugar." As Mrs. Peterson bustled to gather his supplies, Josephine tried to slip past him toward the door. "Miss Halloway," he acknowledged with a slight nod. She paused, her eyes still trained on the worn floorboards. "Mr. Xander," she murmured. "Haven't seen you at the schoolhouse these past few days," he remarked, his tone neutral but curious. The mention of the schoolhouse sent a fresh wave of humiliation through her. I've been unwell," she lied, knowing full well that everyone in the store knew the real reason for her absence. 3 days ago, the Santa Fe bank had been robbed by the notorious Reeves gang. In the confusion that followed, several witnesses claimed they had seen Josephine speaking with one of the gang members the day before. The fact that she had innocently given directions to a stranger had somehow transformed into an accusation that she was a conspirator. When Sheriff Williams had questioned her publicly in front of the schoolhouse, parents had arrived within the hour to collect their children, unwilling to leave them in the care of a criminal sympathizer. "That's so," Owen replied, clearly not believing her. His eyes flickered to the bundle of supplies she clutched enough to last several days without venturing into town again. Mrs. Peterson returned with Owen's order. "Here you are, Mr. Xander, and I've included a copy of today's newspaper. There's an interesting article about the school board meeting last night." Josephine felt as if she'd been struck. She hadn't known there was a meeting. With trembling fingers, she reached for the door handle. "Miss Halloway," Owen called after her, "I'm heading back toward your boarding house." "Might I accompany you?" The store fell silent. Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows shot up nearly to her hairline, and the 2 other customers, Mrs. Collins and her daughter, exchanged meaningful glances. That's not necessary, Mr. Xander," Josephine replied, mortified by the attention. "I insist," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument as he collected his purchases. "It's getting dark, and it's no time for a lady to be walking alone." Josephine stepped outside, the cool evening air offering momentary relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. She kept her head bowed as she walked, acutely aware of Owen's steady presence beside her. They passed several townsfolk who stared openly, some whispering behind their hands. "You can leave me here, Mr. Xander," she said when they were halfway to Mrs. Whittaker's boarding house. "I don't wish to inconvenience you further." Owen stopped walking. "Miss Halloway, might I speak frankly?" She steeled herself, expecting him to finally express the disgust that everyone else in town seemed to feel. "Of course. Hold your head high," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "You did nothing wrong." The unexpected kindness in his words nearly broke her composure. For days, she had endured suspicious glances, harsh whispers, and outright accusations. No one had bothered to hear her side of the story or offer her the benefit of doubt. No one except this man. "How can you be so certain?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Owen adjusted his hat, his eyes scanning the street before returning to her face. "Because I know people, Miss Halloway. Been reading them all my life. Had to, growing up the way I did. And you're no criminal." "The town disagrees with you," she replied bitterly. "The school board met last night. I suspect they've decided to relieve me of my position." "Then they're fools," Owen stated matter-of-factly. "Come on, let me walk you the rest of the way." As they continued in silence, Josephine felt a strange sensation unfurling in her chest, a tiny spark of something that felt dangerously like hope. When they reached the boarding house, Owen tipped his hat. "Miss Halloway, I'm riding into town again tomorrow. If you'd care to join me for coffee at the cafe, I'd welcome the company." Josephine stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Xander, do you understand what associating with me might do to your reputation?" A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "My reputation can withstand a cup of coffee, Miss Halloway. Noon tomorrow." Before she could formulate a response, Mrs. Whittaker opened the front door, her thin face pinched with disapproval. "Miss Halloway, a word if you please." Owen nodded politely to Mrs. Whittaker. "Evening, madam." "Just escorting Miss Halloway home." "How gallant," Mrs. Whittaker replied, her tone suggesting she found it anything but. "Miss Halloway, I need to speak with you about your living arrangements." Josephine's stomach dropped. This was it, she was about to be evicted from the only home she had in Santa Fe. Owen must have sensed her distress. "Mrs. Whittaker, I understand you bake the finest apple pies in the territory. I'd be much obliged if you'd sell me one. For my ranch hands, you understand." The unexpected compliment caught the older woman off guard. "Well, I do have one cooling in the kitchen." "Perfect," Owen replied, reaching into his pocket for money. "I'll take it now if you don't mind." As Mrs. Whittaker retreated inside to fetch the pie, Owen turned to Josephine. "Noon tomorrow," he repeated. "And Miss Halloway, the truth has a way of coming to light, it always does." With those words, he left her standing on the porch, confused by his kindness and unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Inside her small room, Josephine placed her meager supplies on the table and sank onto the edge of her bed. Mrs. Whittaker had been surprisingly civil after selling Owen her pie, though she had mentioned that certain standards must be maintained in her establishment. The unspoken threat was clear. One more whisper about Josephine's character, and she would be looking for new accommodations. She opened the newspaper Mrs. Peterson had reluctantly included with her purchases. There, on the third page, was a small article about the school board meeting. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. unanimously decided to suspend Miss Josephine Halloway from her teaching duties, pending further investigation into her potential involvement with the Reeves gang. She had come to Santa Fe with such hope, carrying little more than her father's pocket watch and her mother's Bible. Teaching had been her salvation after the scandal in Boston. Her father's financial crimes had left them destitute, and her broken engagement to William Townsend had completed their social ruin. Santa Fe was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance at redemption. Now, it seemed history was repeating itself. Once again, she was being judged for crimes she didn't commit. Josephine closed the newspaper and moved to the small mirror hanging above her washstand. Her reflection showed a pale face framed by auburn hair that had begun to escape its pins. Dark circles shadowed eyes that had once been described as her finest feature, a clear, vibrant blue that her mother had called windows to heaven. "Hold your head high," she whispered to herself, echoing Owen's words. "You did nothing wrong." But as she prepared for bed, she couldn't help wondering if she would have the courage to meet him tomorrow. And if she did, what then? Morning arrived with golden shafts of light streaming through Josephine's curtains. She had slept fitfully, her dreams haunted by faceless accusers pointing fingers and whispering her name. Rising early, she washed and dressed with care, selecting her best day dress, a modest blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Josephine spent the morning writing letters, one to her former headmistress in Boston, inquiring about potential teaching positions elsewhere, and another to her cousin Sarah in Denver. If Santa Fe had already judged and convicted her, perhaps it was time to move on. As noon approached, her resolve wavered. Meeting Owen Xander publicly would only fuel the gossip. Yet the thought of his steady confidence, his unexpected kindness when everyone else had turned away, gave her the courage to reach for her bonnet. Mrs. Whittaker intercepted her at the foot of the stairs. "Going out, Miss Halloway, how brave of you." Josephine straightened her shoulders. "Just for some air, Mrs. Whittaker." "I received a visit from Mrs. Coleman this morning," the landlady continued, adjusting her spectacles. "She expressed concern about the character of my tenants. You understand my position." "Perfectly," Josephine replied, her throat tight. "I'll begin looking for other accommodations immediately." Mrs. Whittaker had the grace to look somewhat uncomfortable. "You have until the end of the week." "I'm not heartless, after all." Stepping outside into the bright sunlight, Josephine contemplated returning to her room. What was the point of meeting Owen? What could possibly come of it except more gossip and judgment? She was about to turn back when she spotted him, sitting calmly at an outside table of the cafe, his broad shoulders and familiar hat unmistakable even from a distance. He was reading a newspaper, seemingly oblivious to the curious glances from passers-by. Something about his solitary figure, waiting patiently when he had every reason to avoid her, strengthened her resolve. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the cafe, ignoring the sudden silence that fell over the street as she passed. Owen looked up as she approached, a smile warming his features. He stood immediately. "Miss Halloway, I'm glad you came." "I nearly didn't," she admitted as he pulled out her chair. "But you did," he replied, signaling to the waitress. "That's what matters." The waitress approached hesitantly, her eyes darting between them. "Mr. Xander, what can I get for you and your guest?" "Coffee for both of us, please, Miss Lily, and 2 slices of whatever pie Mrs. Henderson has baked today." Josephine waited until the waitress left before speaking. "Mrs. Whittaker has given me until the end of the week to find new accommodations." Owen frowned. "That's unjust. You haven't even been charged with anything." "In the court of public opinion, I've already been found guilty," she replied, smoothing her napkin in her lap. "The school board has suspended me, and now I've lost my home. I've been considering leaving Santa Fe altogether. Running away won't solve anything, Owen said, his eyes serious. It'll only make you look guilty. What would you have me do? Stay and face daily humiliation? I have no job, soon no place to live, and not a single person in this town believes in my innocence. I do, Owen stated firmly. And I'm not the only one. Sheriff Williams himself told me he thinks the witness accounts are questionable at best. Josephine looked up sharply. You've spoken to the sheriff about me. I have, Owen admitted without apology. I've known Tom Williams for years. He's a good man, but he's under pressure from the mayor and the bank manager to make an arrest. The Reeves gang got away with over $5,000. The waitress returned with their coffee, setting Josephine's cup down with such haste that some spilled onto the saucer. She didn't bother to wipe it up. "Thank you, Miss Lily," Owen said pointedly, his tone causing the young woman to flush before hurrying away. "You see," Josephine said quietly, "this is what I face every day, and now you'll face it too, simply for being seen with me." Owen leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Miss Halloway, do you know why I asked to meet you today?" She shook her head. "Because I believe there's more to this story than what's being told. The Reeves gang has never involved locals in their operations before. Why would they start now? And why with the new school teacher who has no connections in the territory?" "I've been asking myself the same questions," Josephine replied, wrapping her fingers around her coffee cup for warmth despite the mild day. "All I did was give directions to a man who asked where the bank was located. I had no idea who he was. Would you recognize him if you saw him again?" Owen asked. "I think so. He had a distinctive scar along his jaw and his eyes were cold. I remember feeling uncomfortable, but I dismissed it as my imagination." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like Luke Reeves, the youngest of the brothers. He's known for his charm when needed, but he's perhaps the most dangerous of the lot." A chill ran down Josephine's spine. Do you think they chose me deliberately to divert suspicion?" "It's possible. The gang is known for its planning. Nothing is ever left to chance." Owen's eyes narrowed. "Which makes me wonder who might have suggested you as a potential accomplice in the first place." Before Josephine could respond, Sheriff Williams approached their table, his weathered face serious beneath the brim of his hat. "Miss Halloway, Mr. Xander," he greeted, nodding to each of them. "Mind if I join you for a moment?" Owen gestured to an empty chair. "Please, Sheriff, we were just discussing the bank robbery." The sheriff settled his large frame into the chair, removing his hat. "That's actually why I'm here. Miss Halloway, I've been reviewing the witness statements against you and I've found some inconsistencies." Hope flared briefly in Josephine's chest. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "For one, Mrs. Coleman claims she saw you speaking with a member of the Reeves gang outside the bank the day before the robbery, giving him details about the building layout. But the bank manager confirms you've never set foot inside the bank except to open your account when you first arrived in town." "I told you I only gave directions to a stranger," Josephine insisted. "I never discussed the bank's layout." Sheriff Williams nodded. "I believe you, Miss Halloway, especially after what I discovered this morning." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "This was found among the personal effects of one of Mrs. Coleman's boarders who left town suddenly last night. It's a letter from Luke Reeves himself." Josephine gasped. "Mrs. Coleman's boarder was involved with the Reeves gang." "Not just involved," the sheriff replied grimly. "According to this letter, he was their inside man, a fellow by the name of James Turner. He'd been working at the bank as a clerk for the past 3 months. Owen's expression darkened. "And Mrs. Coleman accused Miss Halloway to divert attention from her own boarder." "That's my thinking," the sheriff agreed. I'm on my way to question Mrs. Coleman now. I wanted to inform you first, Miss Halloway. It appears you're the victim of deliberate misdirection." Tears of relief sprang to Josephine's eyes. "Thank you, Sheriff. I can't express what this means to me." The sheriff stood, replacing his hat. "Don't thank me yet. The damage to your reputation has already been done, and people in this town can be slow to change their minds, but I'll do what I can to set the record straight." After the sheriff departed, Josephine sat in stunned silence, processing the news. "I don't understand," she finally said. "Why would Mrs. Coleman protect a criminal? Surely she couldn't have known." Owen's expression was grim. "People have many reasons for the choices they make. Greed, fear, or perhaps something more personal." "What do you mean?" "James Turner arrived in town around the same time you did. Handsome fellow, from what I recall. Paid special attention to Mrs. Coleman's daughter, Emily." Understanding dawned on Josephine. "Emily Coleman was in my class. She's only 16, but her mother has been pushing her to find a suitable match. She was disappointed when I suggested Emily continue her education instead of focusing solely on marriage prospects." "There you have it," Owen said. "Mrs. Coleman had a grudge against you and a blind spot for Turner. When the robbery happened, she saw an opportunity to discredit you while protecting him. But to accuse me of such a serious crime—" Josephine shook her head in disbelief. "The cruelty of it is staggering. People can surprise you for better or worse," Owen replied, his eyes holding hers. "The question now is, what will you do next?" Josephine considered the question carefully. "I still have no job or home, regardless of whether my name is cleared." "As for a home," Owen said, "my sister Clara lives alone in a small house on the edge of town since her husband passed. She's mentioned wanting a boarder for company. It would be a respectable arrangement." "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. Clara would welcome the company, especially from someone educated like yourself. She was a teacher back in Missouri before she married." Josephine felt a small spark of hope. "And what about employment? I doubt the school board will reinstate me immediately, even with the sheriff's findings." Owen smiled, a warm expression that transformed his serious face. "As it happens, I've been looking for someone to teach the children at Double Creek Ranch. We have 5 families working there with 8 children between them. They currently ride 10 miles to town for schooling, which is becoming increasingly difficult. You're offering me a teaching position?" Josephine asked, astonished. "I am. It would be temporary until your position in town is restored. The pay is modest, but it includes meals and transportation." The offer was unexpected and generous, perhaps too generous. "Mr. Xander, why are you helping me? You barely know me." Owen's expression turned contemplative. "When I was a boy, my family fell on hard times after my father was injured in a mining accident. The town we lived in turned its back on us, believing my father's injury was due to drunkenness rather than unsafe conditions. We lost everything: our home, our standing in the community, even our church membership." "That's terrible," Josephine said softly. "One man stood by us, a rancher named Samuel Grant. He offered my father work that he could do despite his injury and gave our family a place to live. When I asked him why he helped us when no one else would, he said, 'A man's character isn't revealed by how he treats people at their best, but by how he treats them at their worst.'" Owen's eyes met hers, sincere and unwavering. "I learned then that sometimes all a person needs is one person to believe in them when no one else will." Josephine felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Your Mr. Grant sounds like a wise man." "He was," Owen agreed. "And I try to honor his memory by living according to his example. So, Miss Halloway, will you accept my offer?" For the first time in days, Josephine smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Xander, I believe I will." The following morning found Josephine packing her belongings under the watchful eye of Mrs. Whittaker. The landlady had been considerably less hostile after Sheriff Williams's visit the previous evening, but the damage was done. Josephine had no interest in remaining where she was clearly unwanted. "I suppose I may have been hasty in my judgment," Mrs. Whittaker offered stiffly as Josephine closed her trunk. "If the sheriff has cleared your name—" "Thank you for your consideration," Josephine replied politely, unwilling to engage further. "Mr. Xander will be here shortly to transport my things to his sister's home." Mrs. Whittaker's eyebrows shot up. "Clara Xander is taking you in. Well, I never—" A knock at the door saved Josephine from having to respond. Owen stood on the porch, hat in hand, alongside a slender woman with the same keen gray eyes as her brother. "Miss Halloway," Owen greeted. "Allow me to introduce my sister, Clara Xander." Clara stepped forward, extending her hand with a warm smile. "Miss Halloway, I'm delighted to meet you. Owen has told me so much about your situation. I want you to know you're welcome in my home for as long as you need." The genuine kindness in Clara's voice nearly brought tears to Josephine's eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Xander. Your generosity is overwhelming. Please call me Clara." "And it's not generosity, it's justice." Owen explained everything. "The way this town has treated you is shameful." She cast a pointed look at Mrs. Whittaker, who had the grace to flush. Owen loaded Josephine's trunk onto his wagon while the women exchanged pleasantries. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Williams approached on horseback. "Miss Halloway," he called, dismounting. "I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to let you know that Mrs. Coleman has confessed to fabricating her testimony against you. It seems young Turner convinced her that you were suspicious of him, and she acted to protect him and her daughter's prospects." "Will she face charges?" Josephine asked. The sheriff sighed. "That's complicated. She's agreed to cooperate in our pursuit of Turner and the Reeves gang. In exchange, Mayor Thompson is inclined to be lenient." "I see," Josephine replied, unsurprised. The Colemans were one of Santa Fe's oldest families with considerable influence. "For what it's worth," the sheriff added, "I've spoken with the school board. They'll be meeting tomorrow to discuss reinstating you, with back pay for the time you were suspended." Owen stepped forward. "While we appreciate that, Sheriff, Miss Halloway has accepted a position teaching at Double Creek Ranch for the time being. She'll need some time to consider whether she wishes to return to the town school." The sheriff looked between them, a flicker of understanding crossing his weathered face. "I see. Well, the offer stands, Miss Halloway, whenever you're ready." As they drove through town toward Clara's home, Josephine was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed their progress. News traveled quickly in Santa Fe, and the revelation of Mrs. Coleman's deception would already be circulating. "It will take time," Clara said gently, noting Josephine's discomfort. "People are slow to admit when they're wrong." "Some never do," Owen added from his position handling the reins. "But you'll find the folks at Double Creek more welcoming. They're good people who judge on merit, not gossip." Clara's home was a charming cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a small garden that was blooming with early summer flowers. Inside, it was modestly but comfortably furnished, with shelves of books lining the parlor walls. "You have a beautiful home," Josephine said as Clara showed her to a sunny bedroom at the back of the house. "Thank you. It's been a bit lonely since George passed, but I keep busy with my garden and my books, and now I'll have delightful company." Clara patted Josephine's hand. "Owen told me you're well educated. I thought you might appreciate this room. It has the best light for reading." "You're very thoughtful," Josephine replied, touched by the consideration. "Well, I'll let you settle in. Owen will be joining us for supper before he returns to the ranch. He mentioned he'll take you out there tomorrow to meet the families and see the schoolroom they've prepared. After Clara left, Josephine sat on the edge of the neatly made bed, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Just yesterday, she had been a pariah, facing the prospect of leaving Santa Fe in disgrace. Today, she had a home, potential employment, and people who believed in her innocence. And then there was Owen Xander. His kindness when she needed it most had touched something deep within her, a part of her that had begun to believe she was destined to face life's hardships alone. Supper that evening was a simple but delicious affair. Clara proved to be a talented cook and a fascinating conversationalist, well-read and opinionated in the best possible way. As they enjoyed apple cobbler for dessert, the conversation turned to Josephine's teaching experience. The children at Double Creek range from 6 to 12 years old, Owen explained. Their parents are eager for education but concerned about the daily journey to town, especially as winter approaches. It sounds like a challenge, Josephine admitted. Teaching multiple ages simultaneously requires careful planning. If anyone can manage it, you can, Clara asserted confidently. Owen mentioned you graduated from the Boston Teachers College with honors. Josephine glanced at Owen, surprised he had learned this detail about her past. He met her gaze with a slight smile. I may have made some inquiries, he admitted. Your references from Boston are impeccable. You went to a lot of trouble, Josephine observed. I like to be thorough, Owen replied simply. After supper, Clara excused herself to visit a neighbor, leaving Owen and Josephine alone in the parlor. An awkward silence fell between them. Your sister is wonderful, Josephine finally said. Thank you for arranging this. Clara has been lonely since George died, Owen replied. Having you here is good for her too. Still, your kindness has been exceptional. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Owen leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious. Miss Halloway, Josephine, may I speak plainly? The use of her given name sent a curious flutter through her chest. Of course. I didn't help you expecting repayment. I helped you because it was the right thing to do, and because— He hesitated, seemingly searching for the right words. Because from the moment you arrived in Santa Fe, I've found myself drawn to you in a way I can't entirely explain. Josephine's breath caught in her throat. Mr. Xander, Owen, he corrected gently. Please. Owen, she amended, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he assured her. I understand this is sudden, and you've been through a terrible ordeal. I'm not expecting anything from you. I just wanted you to know that my interest in your welfare goes beyond simple charity. Josephine studied his face, the earnest gray eyes, the strong line of his jaw partially hidden by his beard, the slight crease between his brows as he awaited her response. There was something undeniably compelling about Owen Xander, a quiet strength that drew her like a moth to flame. I'm honored, she finally said, and perhaps a little overwhelmed. These past few days have been a whirlwind. Owen nodded, standing to take his leave. I understand completely. Take all the time you need. I'll return tomorrow morning to take you to Double Creek. We'll depart around 8 if that suits you. That would be fine, Josephine replied, rising as well. Thank you again for everything. At the door, Owen paused, turning back to her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. Good night, Josephine. Sleep well. Good night, Owen, she replied softly. After he left, Josephine remained in the parlor, attempting to sort through her tumultuous emotions. Owen Xander's unexpected confession had stirred feelings she had long since buried after her disastrous engagement in Boston. William Townsend had abandoned her the moment her father's financial crimes came to light. unwilling to tarnish his family's sterling reputation by association. The betrayal had taught her a painful lesson about the fragility of affection when faced with adversity. Owen, however, had stood by her when she was at her lowest point, risking his own reputation to defend hers. Such integrity was rare, and it both attracted and frightened her. Was she ready to trust again, to risk her heart? Or was her gratitude clouding her judgment? With these questions swirling in her mind, Josephine prepared for bed, uncertain of what the future held but, for the first time in days, hopeful it might contain something more than mere survival. The journey to Double Creek Ranch the following morning took just over an hour. Josephine sat beside Owen on the wagon seat, alternately admiring the breathtaking New Mexican landscape and stealing glances at her companion. In the clear morning light, she noticed details about him she had previously overlooked: the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the careful way he handled the reins, the quiet confidence in his posture. "Tell me about your ranch," she prompted, breaking a comfortable silence. Owen's face lit up with pride. "Double Creek has been in operation for nearly 15 years now. I started working there when I was 18, just a ranch hand. The original owner, Mr. Harding, took a liking to me, mentored me. When his health began to fail 5 years ago, he made me foreman. And when he passed 2 years back, having no children of his own, he left the ranch to me." "That's remarkable," Josephine said, genuinely impressed. "You must have earned his trust completely." "I worked hard," Owen replied simply. "The ranch employs 15 men full-time plus their families. We run about 2,000 head of cattle and have some of the finest horses in the territory." As they crested a small rise, the ranch came into view in the valley, below a sprawling collection of buildings centered around a handsome 2-story main house, with corrals, barns, and bunkhouses extending outward. Small cottages dotted the perimeter, smoke rising from several chimneys. "It's beautiful," Josephine breathed. "It's home," Owen replied, a note of quiet satisfaction in his voice. They drove past fields where cattle grazed peacefully, then through a sturdy gate bearing the ranch's brand, 2 parallel wavy lines representing the creeks that gave the property its name. As they approached the main house, a group of children playing in a nearby field spotted the wagon and came running, followed by several women emerging from the cottages. "Mr. Owen's back," shouted a tow-headed boy of about 8, racing alongside the wagon. "And he's brought the teacher." Josephine felt a flutter of nervousness as the wagon rolled to a stop. All eyes were on her as Owen came around to help her down, his hand warm and steady on hers. "Everyone," he announced, "this is Miss Josephine Halloway. She's agreed to teach our children right here at Double Creek." A woman stepped forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome, Miss Halloway. I'm Margaret Davis. These 3 hellions are mine." She indicated the blonde boy and 2 younger girls hovering nearby. "We're mighty grateful you're willing to come all this way." "It's my pleasure," Josephine replied, warming to the woman's friendly manner. "I look forward to getting to know your children." More introductions followed: the Millers with their twin boys, the Hendersons with their daughter, the Wilsons with their son, and Mrs. Abernathy, the cook, who had a granddaughter living with her. "We've set up the old foreman's cabin as your schoolhouse," Owen explained as he led her away from the welcoming committee. "It's been empty since I moved into the main house. We've added desks and a blackboard, and the ladies have been sewing curtains all week." The cabin was a short walk from the main cluster of buildings, a solid structure with a covered porch and large windows that let in ample light. Inside, Josephine found a simple but well-appointed schoolroom with 10 sturdy desks, a larger desk at the front, and, as promised, a blackboard covering most of one wall. "This is wonderful," she exclaimed, running her hand along one of the desks. "Did you make these?" Owen nodded. "With help from the men, everyone pitched in. The community here, we look after each other." "I can see that," Josephine replied, deeply touched by the effort. "When would you like me to start teaching?" "The children have been asking every day since I mentioned the possibility," Owen said with a smile. "Would Monday be too soon? That gives you tomorrow and Sunday to prepare." "Monday would be perfect," Josephine agreed. "I'll need to know more about each child's previous education, of course, and gather some supplies." "Already taken care of," Owen replied, opening a cabinet to reveal stacks of primers, readers, slates, chalk, and paper. "Clara helped me purchase everything a proper schoolroom needs. And the mothers have agreed to meet with you tomorrow to discuss each child's progress." Josephine was momentarily speechless. The thoughtfulness and thoroughness of the preparation spoke volumes about the man standing before her. "You've thought of everything," she finally said. "I try," Owen replied simply. "Now, would you like to see the rest of the ranch before we head back to town?" The tour was comprehensive and fascinating. Owen showed her the barns, the blacksmith's forge, the bunkhouse where the unmarried ranch hands lived, and the corrals where several magnificent horses watched them with intelligent eyes. "This is Midnight," Owen said, approaching a gleaming black stallion who nickered softly at his approach. "The finest horse I've ever raised." He offered Josephine an apple to give the animal, guiding her hand when she hesitated. The feel of his fingers covering hers, coupled with the soft velvet of the horse's muzzle against her palm, created a strangely intimate moment. "He likes you," Owen observed as the horse gently accepted the treat. "He's usually wary of strangers." "I'm honored," Josephine replied, finding herself reluctant to step away from both the horse and the man beside her. Their final stop was the main house, a handsome structure built of sturdy pine with a wide veranda wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, the rooms were spacious and well-furnished, though distinctly masculine in their simplicity. "It's a bit sparse," Owen admitted as he showed her the parlor. "Clara keeps telling me I need a woman's touch around here." The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken possibility. Josephine felt her cheeks warm and turned to examine a landscape painting hanging above the fireplace. "The view from the north pasture," Owen explained, moving to stand beside her. "One of the few luxuries I've allowed myself. A traveling artist passed through last year and I commissioned it." "It's beautiful," Josephine said sincerely. "You have excellent taste." "In some things," Owen replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Abernathy, who appeared in the doorway to announce that lunch was ready. The meal was served in a spacious dining room that could easily accommodate a dozen people, though today only Josephine and Owen were present. "Usually, I eat with the men," Owen explained as Mrs. Abernathy served a delicious stew with freshly baked bread. "But I thought you might prefer something more private for your first visit." "That was considerate," Josephine replied, though part of her was curious about the camaraderie she had witnessed among the ranch workers. "Everyone seems very happy here." "I try to create a place where people feel valued," Owen said. "Many of my workers came from difficult situations, failed farms, trouble with the law, personal tragedies. Double Creek gives them a chance to start fresh, just as it did for me." The parallel to her own situation wasn't lost on Josephine. "Second chances are precious things," she observed quietly. Owen's eyes met hers across the table. "They are indeed." After lunch, they visited with some of the families again before beginning the journey back to Santa Fe. The return trip was companionable, filled with discussions about the curriculum, Josephine planned to implement and Owen's hopes for the children's education. As the wagon rolled along, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon, Josephine found herself increasingly comfortable in Owen's presence. His straightforward manner and quiet intelligence drew her in, making conversation easy and natural. "Will you stay for supper again?" Clara asked when Owen helped Josephine down from the wagon in front of the cottage. "I've made a beef roast." "Thank you, Clara, but I should get back to the ranch," Owen declined. "There's a calf that needed attention this morning and I want to check on it." After promising to return on Monday to transport Josephine to her first day of teaching, Owen bid them both good night. As his wagon disappeared down the road, Clara linked her arm through Josephine's. "Well," she prompted with a knowing smile, "what did you think of Double Creek?" "It's impressive," Josephine replied honestly. "The schoolroom is perfect and everyone was very welcoming." "And my brother," Clara pressed, "was he a good host?" Josephine felt her cheeks warm. "Very considerate. He seems to have thought of everything." "Owen has always been thorough," Clara agreed. "But I've never seen him go to such lengths for anyone before. He must think very highly of you." Unsure how to respond, Josephine changed the subject to the supplies Owen had purchased for the schoolroom. But later that night, as she prepared for bed, Clara's words echoed in her mind. The idea that she might be special to Owen Xander, that his interest might extend beyond kindness or duty, was both thrilling and terrifying. Her experience with William had left deep scars, making her wary of trusting her heart again. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, it was Owen's face that filled her thoughts, his steady gaze, his rare but transformative smile, the gentle strength in his hands as he guided hers to feed the apple to midnight. Perhaps, she thought drowsily, some risks were worth taking after all. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Josephine created lesson plans for each age group, reviewed the textbooks Owen had provided, and met with the mothers of her future pupils to assess each child's educational needs. By Monday morning, she felt thoroughly prepared and genuinely excited about her new role. Owen arrived precisely at 7:30. His wagon loaded with additional supplies. Clara had suggested a small shelf of books for leisure reading, some maps of the United States and territories, and a brass bell for calling children to class. "You look ready for battle," he observed with a smile as he helped her into the wagon. "Teaching is a kind of battle," Josephine replied, smoothing her skirts. She had chosen her most practical dress for her first day, a sturdy navy cotton that wouldn't show chalk, dust, or dirt. "A battle for hearts and minds." "Then those children don't stand a chance," Owen said, his eyes warm with admiration. The journey to Double Creek seemed shorter this time, filled with comfortable conversation and shared laughter. Josephine found herself studying Owen's profile as he handled the reins, the strong line of his jaw, the way the morning sun highlighted strands of gold in his brown hair, the tiny crinkles at the corner of his eye that deepened when he smiled. When they arrived at the ranch, the children were already gathered outside the schoolhouse, scrubbed clean and wearing their Sunday best. Mrs. Davis stood nearby, holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "We thought you might like a welcoming gift," she explained as Josephine approached. "The children helped bake these cookies for your lunch." Touched by the gesture, Josephine thanked them sincerely. What a wonderful way to begin our first day together. Owen helped carry her supplies inside, lingering longer than strictly necessary. "I'll be around if you need anything," he said, seemingly reluctant to leave. "Just send one of the children to fetch me." "I'm sure we'll be fine," Josephine assured him, though she appreciated his concern. "Teaching is what I know best." As it turned out, the day flew by in a whirl of activity. After initial assessments, Josephine divided the children into 3 groups based on their abilities rather than their ages. To her delight, they were eager learners, respectful and attentive. At noon, they enjoyed a picnic lunch outside, sharing the cookies from Mrs. Davis. The children peppered Josephine with questions about her life in Boston and her journey to New Mexico, which she answered as honestly as she could while avoiding the painful details of her father's downfall. By the time the final lesson concluded at 3 o'clock, Josephine felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was where she belonged in a classroom, nurturing young minds. The circumstances that had brought her to Double Creek might have been painful, but the outcome was proving to be a blessing in disguise. As the children dispersed to their homes, Owen appeared at the schoolhouse door. "How was your first day?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe with casual grace. "Wonderful," Josephine replied honestly, gathering her teaching materials. "They're bright children, eager to learn. I couldn't ask for better students." "They couldn't ask for a better teacher," Owen countered, stepping forward to help her. "Mrs. Abernathy has prepared a special supper to celebrate your first day. I hope you'll join me at the main house." The invitation sent a flutter through Josephine's stomach. "That's very kind. I wouldn't want to impose on your routine, though." "You could never be an imposition," Owen replied simply, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Supper was served in the main house dining room, the table set with fine china and crystal that surprised Josephine. Mrs. Abernathy had outdone herself with a feast of roast chicken, new potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the ranch's garden. "To your first day," Owen said, raising his glass in a toast, "and to many more to come." As they enjoyed the delicious meal, Josephine found herself relaxing completely in Owen's company. They discussed the children's progress, books they had both read, and Owen's plans for expanding the ranch's operations. "I've been considering building a proper community hall," he explained as they lingered over apple pie. "Somewhere for celebrations, dances, perhaps Sunday services when the weather makes travel to town difficult." "That sounds wonderful," Josephine replied. "A place to bring everyone together." "Exactly," Owen agreed, his expression thoughtful. "A ranch isn't just land and cattle, it's people, community, shared purpose." After supper, Owen suggested a short walk to enjoy the evening air. As they strolled along a path that led to a small creek, one of the 2 that gave the ranch its name, Josephine was struck by the beauty of the landscape, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. "It's so peaceful here," she observed, pausing to watch the water tumble over smooth stones. "So different from Boston or even Santa Fe." "You miss the city?" Owen asked, standing close beside her. Josephine considered the question carefully. "I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the theaters, the museums, but there's something honest about this place that I find compelling." "Honest is a good word for it," Owen agreed. "The land doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is, neither do the people who work it." The statement hung in the air between them, an unspoken comparison to the society Josephine had left behind, a world of pretense and appearances, where a family's fall from grace could render them instantly invisible. "Owen," she began hesitantly, feeling the need to be equally honest, "there are things about my past in Boston that you should know." He turned to face her fully, his expression open. "I'm listening." Gathering her courage, Josephine told him everything: her father's desperate financial maneuvers that had crossed the line into fraud, his suicide when faced with exposure, her broken engagement to William Townsend, and the social ostracism that had followed. "William ended our engagement the day after my father's death," she concluded, her voice steady despite the pain of the memory. "He said he couldn't tie his family's name to such a scandal. That was when I knew I had to leave Boston." Throughout her story, Owen had listened without interruption, his face reflecting empathy rather than judgment. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "William Townsend is a fool," he finally said, his voice low and intense. "A man who abandons the woman he claims to love at her darkest hour isn't worthy of the title." The vehemence in his tone surprised her. "You don't think less of me for my father's crimes, for the disgrace, Josephine," Owen said, taking her hands in his. "We don't choose our parents or their actions. We only choose how we respond to the circumstances we're given. You chose courage and integrity, starting a new life rather than hiding in shame. How could I possibly think less of you for that?" The acceptance in his words, the warmth in his eyes, broke something loose inside Josephine, a knot of fear and shame she had carried for so long she had almost forgotten it was there. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassed by her display of emotion. "I didn't mean to. Never apologize for honest feeling," Owen interrupted gently, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. The touch was feather light yet sent a current through her entire body. For a breathless moment, they stood at the edge of something new and frightening and exhilarating. Then Owen stepped back slightly, though his eyes never left hers. "It's getting late," he said softly. "We should head back. Clara will be worried if you're not home by dark." The ride back to Santa Fe was quiet, a comfortable silence punctuated by occasional observations about the stars emerging in the clear desert sky. Josephine was acutely aware of Owen beside her, of the subtle shift that had occurred between them at the creek. When they reached Clara's cottage, Owen helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Tomorrow?" he asked simply. "Tomorrow," Josephine confirmed, knowing he was asking if she would continue teaching at Double Creek. As she watched his wagon disappear into the gathering darkness, Josephine acknowledged to herself that something fundamental had changed. In sharing her past with Owen and receiving not judgment but understanding in return, she had opened herself to the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. The next several weeks fell into a pleasant routine. Each morning, Owen would arrive to transport Josephine to Double Creek, and each evening he would return her to Clara's cottage. The school thrived under Josephine's guidance, with even the most reluctant learners showing marked improvement. As September gave way to October, Josephine found herself increasingly at home on the ranch. She began staying for supper most evenings, sometimes dining with Owen alone, other times joining the families for community meals. On Saturdays, she often spent the entire day at Double Creek, helping with various projects or simply enjoying the ranch's peaceful atmosphere. Her relationship with Owen deepened gradually, built on shared values and mutual respect. He never pressed for more than she was ready to give, content to let their connection evolve naturally. Yet Josephine was acutely aware of the current that ran beneath their interactions, the lingering glances, the casual touches that sent warmth cascading through her, the way conversation flowed between them as easily as the creek water over stones. One crisp October afternoon, as Josephine dismissed her students, Owen appeared at the schoolhouse door with an unusual request. "I need to check on some cattle in the north pasture," he explained. "I thought you might like to ride along. The aspen trees are turning gold and the view is spectacular." The invitation was tempting, but Josephine hesitated. "I'm not much of a horsewoman," she admitted. "In Boston, ladies ride in carriages or side saddle at a very sedate pace." Owen smiled. "I've had Daisy saddled for you. She's the gentlest mare on the ranch, perfect for beginners. And we won't go fast, I promise." Sensing her continued uncertainty, he added, "You can ride with me if you prefer. Midnight can easily carry us both." The thought of sitting so close to Owen, perhaps with his arms around her for balance, sent a flush of heat to Josephine's cheeks. "No, no, I'll try, Daisy," she said quickly. "It's a skill I should learn if I'm to live in this territory." If Owen noticed her blush, he was gentleman enough not to comment. Instead, he led her to the corral where a placid chestnut mare waited, already saddled and ready. With patience and gentle guidance, Owen helped Josephine mount and showed her how to hold the reins properly. "The most important thing is to relax," he advised. "Daisy can sense if you're nervous. Trust her, and she'll take care of you." After a few uncertain moments, Josephine found her balance and confidence. Soon they were riding side by side along a well-worn trail that led away from the main ranch buildings and into more rugged terrain. "You're a natural," Owen observed as Josephine guided Daisy around a rocky outcropping. "Are you sure you haven't done this before?" "Quite sure," she replied with a laugh. "But it's less frightening than I expected. Actually, it's rather exhilarating." The trail climbed steadily, winding through stands of aspen trees whose leaves shimmered like gold coins in the afternoon sunlight. The air grew cooler as they ascended, carrying the crisp scent of autumn and the distant tang of pine. Finally, they emerged onto a high meadow that offered a breathtaking panorama of the entire valley below. Double Creek Ranch spread out before them, its buildings tiny in the distance, surrounded by the patchwork of pastures and the silver ribbons of the two creeks that gave it its name. "Oh, Owen," Josephine breathed, awestruck by the vista. "It's magnificent." "This is my favorite place on the ranch," Owen admitted, dismounting and helping Josephine down from Daisy. "I come here when I need to think, or just to remind myself how fortunate I am." He spread a blanket on a flat rock overlooking the valley and produced a small bundle from his saddlebag. "I asked Mrs. Abernathy to pack us a snack. Nothing elaborate, just some bread, cheese, and apples." The simple meal tasted extraordinary in such surroundings. They ate in companionable silence, watching as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape below. "Thank you for bringing me here," Josephine said when they had finished, "for sharing this with me." Owen turned to look at her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "Josephine, there's something I need to say to you." Her heart began to race, though whether from anticipation or fear she couldn't say. "Yes. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing you with the children, watching you build a new life despite everything you've been through." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known." Josephine's breath caught in her throat. "Owen, please, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I know you've been hurt before. I know trust doesn't come easily to you and you have every reason to be cautious. But I need you to know how I feel." He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "I'm falling in love with you, Josephine Halloway. Actually, that's not quite true. I've already fallen completely and irrevocably." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. In that moment, looking into Owen's earnest gray eyes, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that this was nothing like what she had experienced with William. This was deeper, truer, built on a foundation of respect and understanding rather than social convenience. "You don't need to say anything now," Owen continued, misinterpreting her silence. "I understand if you need time, Owen," Josephine interrupted, finding her voice at last. "I don't need time. I know what I feel." Taking a deep breath, she allowed the walls she had built around her heart to finally crumble. "I love you too. I think I've been falling since the day you told me to hold my head high." The joy that spread across Owen's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. With infinite tenderness, he reached up to cup her cheek. "May I kiss you, Josephine?" Instead of answering, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The first touch of his lips on hers was gentle, almost reverential, but as she responded, the kiss deepened into something more profound, a promise, a beginning, a homecoming. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day I saw you through the window of the general store," he admitted with a soft laugh. "Even though I was scandalous company," she teased. "Especially then," he replied, completely serious. "You looked so alone, yet so dignified. I knew right then you were someone extraordinary." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting the valley in shades of gold and amber, they gathered their things and mounted their horses for the return journey. This time, they rode closer together, their hands occasionally reaching across the space between them in a touch that spoke volumes. The changes in their relationship became apparent to everyone at Double Creek over the following days. Though Owen and Josephine maintained proper decorum, especially around the children, their feelings were evident in small gestures, the way Owen's hand would linger at the small of her back as he helped her from the wagon, the soft smiles they exchanged across rooms, the way they gravitated toward each other in any gathering. Clara, observant as ever, noticed immediately when Josephine returned from the ride to the north pasture. "Well," she said, taking in Josephine's glowing face, "it seems my brother finally found his courage." "Was it that obvious?" Josephine asked, somewhat embarrassed. "Only to anyone with eyes," Clara replied with a laugh. "Owen has been smitten since the day he met you. I've never seen him like this, distracted, always finding excuses to come into town, smiling at nothing in particular." The revelation that Owen's feelings had developed so early and had been so apparent to others both surprised and touched Josephine. "I've been cautious," she admitted, "after what happened in Boston." "As you should be," Clara agreed, "but Owen is nothing like your former fiancé. When he gives his heart, it's for keeps." The wisdom of Clara's words became increasingly evident as October progressed. Owen courted Josephine with a combination of old-fashioned chivalry and refreshing directness. There were no games, no hidden agendas, just an honest man expressing his growing love through both words and actions. He brought her wildflowers gathered from the ranch's meadows, listened attentively when she spoke of her hopes for the school, and shared his own dreams for Double Creek's future. In the evenings, they often sat on Clara's porch, talking until the stars emerged in the vast New Mexican sky. As their feelings deepened, Josephine found herself healing from the wounds of her past. Owen's steadfast love and acceptance helped her to see that her father's mistakes and William's betrayal didn't define her worth or determine her future. One evening in late October, as they sat before the fireplace in Clara's parlor while she visited a friend, Owen took Josephine's hand with unusual solemnity. "There's something I need to ask you," he began, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his tone. "That sounds serious," Josephine replied, trying to lighten his mood though her own heart had begun to race. "It is," Owen confirmed. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This belonged to my mother," he explained, tipping a delicate gold ring with a single pearl into his palm. "It's not fancy or expensive, but it was given with love." Josephine's breath caught as Owen slid from his chair to one knee before her. "Josephine Halloway, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought joy, warmth, and purpose not just to me, but to everyone at Double Creek. I cannot imagine my future without you in it." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes as Owen continued, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face. I'm asking if you would do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife. I promise to love, cherish, and respect you all the days of my life." In that moment, looking into Owen's earnest gray eyes, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that this man, this kind, honorable, steadfast man, was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had dared to hope for. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, Owen Xander, I will marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, Owen slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. "My mother would have loved you," he said softly. "She valued courage and kindness above all else. You have both in abundance." Rising to his feet, Owen drew Josephine up with him and into his arms. The kiss they shared was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. News of their engagement spread quickly through Santa Fe and Double Creek. The reaction at the ranch was uniformly positive, with the families expressing genuine delight. Mrs. Davis organized an impromptu celebration, and the children presented Josephine with handmade cards and small gifts. In Santa Fe, the response was more mixed. Those who had been quickest to condemn Josephine during the bank robbery scandal were notably silent, while others, including Sheriff Williams and Mayor Thompson, offered sincere congratulations. "You've proven them all wrong," Clara observed as she helped Josephine address wedding invitations. "The scandalous schoolteacher is marrying one of the most respected ranchers in the territory. It's deliciously satisfying." Josephine laughed. "I'm not marrying Owen to vindicate myself." "Of course not," Clara agreed, "but it's a pleasant side effect, don't you think?" The wedding was set for the Saturday before Christmas. Given the distances involved and the unpredictability of winter weather, they opted for a small ceremony at Double Creek rather than in town. Owen suggested building the community hall he had been planning, so it could serve as their wedding venue, its first official function. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. The community hall took shape rapidly, with every man on the ranch contributing labor. Meanwhile, Josephine continued teaching, helped Clara with wedding arrangements, and began the process of moving her belongings to the main house at Double Creek, which would become their home. Owen proved to be a considerate fiancé, attentive to Josephine's wishes while also offering suggestions of his own. Together, they made decisions about everything from the ceremony itself to changes they wanted to make to the main house. "This will be your home too," Owen insisted when Josephine hesitated to suggest alterations to the parlor. "I want it to reflect both of us, not just me." As the wedding day approached, Josephine received an unexpected letter from her cousin Sarah in Denver. In addition to accepting the wedding invitation, Sarah enclosed a newspaper clipping that caused Josephine's hands to tremble. "What is it?" Clara asked, noticing her distress. "William Townsend," Josephine replied, her voice tight. "He's been arrested for financial fraud, the same crime my father committed. According to Sarah, his family's shipping company has been operating illegitimately for years." Clara's eyes widened. "The man who abandoned you because of your father's scandal was guilty of the same offense." "It appears so," Josephine confirmed, a complex mix of emotions washing over her vindication, a touch of bitter satisfaction, but primarily a profound sense of closure. That evening she showed the letter to Owen. "I'm not sure how to feel," she admitted. "Part of me wants to celebrate the irony, but mostly I just feel free, as if the last tie to my old life has finally been severed." Owen took her hands in his. "You know what this means, don't you? You were right to hold your head high. Your father's mistakes were his own, as are William's. You've always been innocent. You believed that before this proof," Josephine pointed out, love for this man welling up inside her. "Because I know you," Owen replied simply, "but I'm glad the rest of the world will know it too." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a dusting of snow that transformed Double Creek into a winter wonderland. The newly completed community hall had been decorated with pine boughs, red berries, and candles that filled the space with warm, golden light. In Clara's cottage, where Josephine had spent the night in accordance with tradition, a flurry of activities centered around the bride. Clara, Mrs. Davis, and several other women from the ranch helped her dress and arrange her hair. "Owen won't know what hit him, Mrs. Davis declared as she fastened the last button on Josephine's gown, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim that Clara had helped her select in Santa Fe. "Something borrowed," Clara said, fastening a pearl necklace around Josephine's throat. "This was our mother's to match your ring." "Something blue," contributed Mrs. Henderson, presenting a blue ribbon to weave into Josephine's upswept auburn hair. "Something old," added Mrs. Abernathy, handing Josephine a delicate handkerchief edged in antique lace. "My grandmother carried this at her wedding. It's brought good luck to brides in my family for generations." "And something new," finished Mrs. Davis, presenting a pair of soft leather gloves. "For those cold winter rides with your husband." Touched beyond words, Josephine embraced each woman. "Thank you all for accepting me, for your friendship, for everything." A knock at the door announced Sheriff Williams, who had agreed to give Josephine away in the absence of her father. "It's time, Miss Halloway," he said, his weathered face breaking into a smile as he beheld her. "Though I reckon I won't be calling you that much longer." The short journey to the community hall in a wagon decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons gave Josephine a few moments to compose herself. Through the windows of the hall, she could see that it was filled to capacity, not just the ranch families, but many townspeople from Santa Fe as well. As Sheriff Williams helped her down from the wagon, Josephine took a deep breath. "Ready?" he asked kindly. "More than ready," she replied with absolute certainty. The doors opened, and Josephine entered on the sheriff's arm to the strains of music played by Mr. Henderson on his fiddle. The assembled guests rose to their feet, but Josephine saw only Owen waiting for her at the front of the hall, his face alight with love and wonder. Owen had never looked more handsome than he did in his new black suit, his beard neatly trimmed, his hair combed back from his forehead. As she walked toward him, their eyes locked, and the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Reverend Johnson from the Santa Fe Church officiated, his words emphasizing the commitment and partnership that marriage entailed. When it came time for the vows, Owen's voice rang out strong and clear, while Josephine's was soft but equally firm. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared. "Mr. Xander, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was both tender and filled with promise, eliciting cheers and applause from the assembled guests. As they turned to face their friends and community as husband and wife, Josephine felt a sense of rightness, of coming home, that she had never experienced before. The celebration that followed was joyous and heartfelt. Tables laden with food prepared by Mrs. Abernathy and the other ranch women filled one end of the hall, while the other was cleared for dancing. Mr. Henderson's fiddle was joined by several other musicians from town, creating lively music that soon had everyone on their feet. Owen led Josephine in the first dance, holding her with a reverent tenderness that made her heart swell. "Happy, Mrs. Xander," he murmured, the new name sending a thrill through her. "Completely," she replied, meaning it with all her heart. As the evening progressed, Josephine danced not only with her new husband but with many of the ranch hands and townsmen, including Sheriff Williams and Mayor Thompson. The women who had once whispered behind her back now approached with congratulations and invitations to social events in town. "Isn't it remarkable how a good marriage can erase a scandal?" Clara observed dryly as she joined Josephine for a moment of rest. "People are fickle," Josephine agreed with a small smile. "But I find I don't care much anymore. The opinions that matter to me are here at Double Creek." As the celebration wound down, Owen and Josephine thanked their guests and accepted final congratulations. They had decided against a wedding trip, preferring to begin their married life immediately at the ranch, though Owen had promised a journey to Denver in the spring. The short ride to the main house now, their home together, was quiet, both of them wrapped in private thoughts and anticipation. Owen had insisted on carrying Josephine over the threshold, an old tradition he said his father had honored with his mother. Once inside, in the warm glow of the lamps Mrs. Abernathy had left lit for them, Owen set Josephine gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xander," he said softly, his eyes filled with love. "Home," Josephine repeated, the word resonating with new meaning. "I never thought I would find one again after Boston." "And I never thought I would find you," Owen replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The perfect partner for this life." As he bent to kiss her, Josephine knew that the journey that had begun with shame and scandal had led her to a place of love, acceptance, and belonging beyond anything she could have imagined. Owen had told her to hold her head high when she was at her lowest point, believing in her innocence and her worth when no one else would. Now, as his wife, she would face whatever the future held with that same dignity, not alone, but with this good man by her side. Spring arrived at Double Creek in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The harsh winter had given way to mild, sun-filled days that seemed to stretch endlessly across the New Mexican landscape. For Josephine, the transformation of the season mirrored the transformation in her own life, from the barren isolation of scandal to the vibrant fullness of love and community. Marriage to Owen had exceeded her every expectation. They had settled into a rhythm of shared work and companionship that felt as natural as breathing. Each morning, they rose early to greet the day together, Owen heading out to oversee ranch operations, while Josephine prepared for her teaching duties. In the evenings, they shared the events of their day over supper, sometimes alone, sometimes with ranch families or visitors from town. The school at Double Creek had flourished under Josephine's continued guidance. When the Santa Fe School Board had formally offered to reinstate her position in January, she had politely declined, preferring to remain with the ranch children who had become so dear to her. "Besides," she had told Owen with a smile, "the commute is much shorter this way." On this particular April morning, Josephine stood on the porch of their home, watching as Owen worked with a spirited young colt in the nearby corral. The easy grace with which he moved, the patient firmness he showed the animal, reminded her of how he approached all aspects of life with steadiness and integrity. As if sensing her gaze, Owen looked up, his face breaking into a warm smile that still had the power to quicken her pulse. He said something to the ranch hand beside him, and then made his way toward the house. "Admiring the view, Mrs. Xander," he teased as he climbed the porch steps. "Indeed I was, Mr. Xander," she replied, accepting his kiss with pleasure despite the dust that clung to his clothes. Owen studied her face, his expression growing more serious. "You're looking especially beautiful this morning. There's a glow about you." Josephine felt her cheeks warm. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you. I received a letter from Dr. Matthews yesterday confirming what I've suspected for a few weeks now." Owen's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you unwell?" Taking his hands in hers, Josephine smiled. "Quite the contrary. Owen, we're going to have a baby. Dr. Matthews says the child should arrive in late November." For a moment, Owen simply stared at her, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled the horses in the nearby corral, he swept her into his arms, spinning her in a circle that left them both laughing breathlessly. "A baby," he repeated when he finally set her down, his hands gentling as they came to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Josephine, this is miraculous." The wonder in his voice, the tender reverence in his touch brought tears to Josephine's eyes. "You're pleased, then?" "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," Owen replied, drawing her close again, more carefully this time. "I'm overwhelmed with joy, with gratitude, with love for you and this child we've created together." The months that followed were filled with preparations and anticipation. Owen insisted on building a proper nursery adjacent to their bedroom, working on it in the evenings and on Sundays. The ranch families, delighted by the news, contributed handmade gifts: a cradle from Mr. Henderson, quilts and baby clothes from the women, a tiny pair of soft leather boots from the ranch's saddle maker. Clara visited often from Santa Fe, bringing advice and additional supplies. "I always knew I'd be an aunt someday," she declared as she helped Josephine organize the growing collection of baby items. "But I never imagined I'd be this excited about it." As autumn painted the landscape in golds and russets, Josephine's body changed to accommodate the growing life within. She continued teaching until early November, when Owen and Mrs. Davis insisted she rest in preparation for the birth. "The children understand," Mrs. Davis assured her when Josephine expressed concern about leaving them. "They're as excited about this baby as the rest of us. They've been practicing their reading so they can tell stories to their new teacher's child." The baby, a healthy boy they named James Owen Xander, after both their fathers arrived on a clear, cold night just before Thanksgiving. Dr. Matthews had ridden out from Santa Fe to attend the birth, but it was Clara and Mrs. Abernathy who provided the most support during Josephine's labor. When Owen was finally allowed into the bedroom to meet his son, his face reflected a mixture of awe, pride, and profound love that Josephine knew she would remember for the rest of her life. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, carefully taking the swaddled infant from Josephine's arms. "Absolutely perfect." Looking at her husband cradling their child, Josephine felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. The journey from Boston to Santa Fe, from scandal to acceptance, from solitude to this rich family life, had been marked by both hardship and joy. But every step had led her here, to this moment, to these people who had become her world. "Hold your head high," Owen had told her on that dusty Santa Fe street when she was at her lowest point. "You did nothing wrong." Now, surrounded by love in this home they had created together, Josephine knew she would always hold her head high, not in defiance of judgment, but in celebration of the beautiful life they had built from the ashes of the old. "Welcome to Double Creek, little one," she murmured as Owen returned the baby to her arms. "Welcome home.